So the study I chose to focus on had to do with assessing the effectiveness of time-related interventions in children with ADHD. The study was particularly focused on daily time management and how students with ADHD experience daily time management. It refers to how a person can transfer a plan into action and accomplish everyday activities in the right order within certain time intervals. So essentially, it's about how we go about performing our daily tasks and doing so successfully within appropriate periods of time. The significance of this is that daily time management is important in becoming an independent individual and for performing everyday activities successfully. The problem is that those with ADHD have problems organizing materials and activities, in organizing time management, and in planning. Those with ADHD have been found to have delayed maturation of the cerebral and prefrontal regions that are important for executive functions, including time management. This translates into difficulty automizing routines, understanding the concept of time, being on time, starting and completing daily activities independently, planning and completing long-term projects, and understanding using a calendar, hurrying up if required, and a variety of other just regular everyday comeuppances. This interferes with daily routines. In a school setting, obviously, this interferes with completing homework and schoolwork and can have negative impacts on social relations. The problems with daily time management can continue into adulthood for those who have ADHD, and may manifest in procrastination, missed appointments, missed deadlines, etc. Some important terms for this particular study. Time processing ability. This has to do with sort of different levels of understanding time. It starts with basic time perception, moves on to time orientation, and then the most complex level being time management. These skills develop during childhood and adolescence, typically. Time perception having to do with how we experience time and the duration activities. It's a pretty basic understanding of time. And then time orientation, again, slightly more complex, but it's how to tell time, knowing what day of the month it is, that sort of thing. Time management being how to organize your time within the time that you have. Another key term is time-assisted devices. This is a form of assisted technology which are designed to compensate for difficulties in time management, time orientation, and the experience of time. This could be pretty simple, reminders, alarm clocks, and visual representations of time, etc. The purpose of this particular study was to investigate how interventions consisting of training and time processing ability and compensation with time-assisted devices affects time processing ability and daily time management in children with ADHD compared against those who only receive educational interventions. So essentially the study had two groups, a control group and an intervention group. The control group only received education on TPA and time management, where the intervention group received the education as well as TPA skills training and time-assisted devices that were specifically catered to their individual needs. The study aimed at seeing if the interventions would have any effect on the TPA skills and time management of children with ADHD. The population that was studied were parents that had self-reported their children as having ADHD. The children were clinically diagnosed long before the study, and prior to the study they also confirmed they met the study criteria with a particular test. There were 65 children involved, aging ranges between 9 and 15. There were 46 boys, 19 girls, and students came from multiple different centers in Sweden, different schools and organizations, from both urban and rural areas. As for the methods, it was a randomized controlled study, which combined different qualitative and quantitative measures. The intervention group and control groups had different extents of interventions in that they were personalized. Data collection was done at a baseline prior to the study commencing, during the study, and after interventions, and the interventions lasted 3 months. They were conducted in real-world settings, such as schools and homes. As for the interventions, they had 3 particular components. These consisted of advocacy, which was like an education component, compensation, which had to do with coaching and training, and remediation, which had to do with student activities. The control group was only offered advocacy, the education component, where the intervention group were offered all 3. So as for the advocacy group, it was a pretty traditional educational approach. Parents and teachers were welcome to participate and observe, as well as coaches and school staff. It was about 6 hours long in sessions. There were discussions where people shared their experiences with ADHD and time processing and time management skills. They addressed different strategies in improving these skills, and some consequences of deficiencies, and how to compensate for these deficiencies. The compensation component that was offered to the intervention group consisted of a combination of time-assisted devices and individual strategies that were catered to suit each individual student's needs. Treatment sessions were provided by an occupational therapist and a coach, and the parents were involved. In short, the parent and coach would regularly meet with the occupational therapist, who would assess, monitor progress, and help with goal setting and the development of the individualized plans. And they were trying to find strategies that would work well for the child and prescribe the appropriate time-assisted devices. Remediation was more activity-based. It was supported by a coach as well as parents and teachers. The child would perform a set of 14 different time-skilled training tasks that were of increasing complexity. They would do this for 20 minutes a day, 1 to 3 times a week, for 12 weeks, and then for another 12 weeks after that, except they would do so without the coach. Again, the tasks would start with more simple tasks and progress to more complex tasks, having to do, beginning with time perception, moving on to time orientation, and then finally the goal was time management. Time perception, an example of a time perception activity might be to compare the amount of time needed to perform the same activity in 2 different ways. So, for example, how long would it take you to walk to school versus how long might it take you to bike to school? A time orientation activity might be something like using a computer program to help you learn how to tell the time. As for a time management activity, an example might be that the child used a self-measured activity and then decided how many times they could fit that activity into a 45-minute period. As for the results, they found that those that received remediation combined with compensation were significantly improved in time management, or in time processing ability, in time perception, and in time orientation, compared to those who only received education and standard methods of care through the advocacy component. All children increased from the baseline to follow-up, but the children in the intervention group increased significantly compared to the control group. It's important to note that there was no significant effect regarding the most complex time processing ability, being time management, and they explain this according to a variety of different factors. It could be partially because of the children's age and because many of the children were too young for time management to be all that important or well developed. It could also be explained by the nature of the interventions, which focused on the difficulties in time perception and time orientation, which were lower level orders of thinking, versus time management, which was at the higher end. Of the 14 assigned tasks, the complex tasks were those that took place later, and they were the time management tasks, and they were only reached based on the student's level of understanding, so fewer children engaged in those tasks. As for the implications of the study, it was one of the first to introduce that time skill training improves time processing ability for children with ADHD, which may inspire and promote options for interventions for children with different developmental disabilities and time management challenges. The interventions improve time management, processing ability, and daily time management in children with ADHD aged 9 to 15 years old. Most of the challenging tasks in the study were focused on everyday activities, so the children could theoretically transfer the experiences and skills that they had learned into activities that they perform in daily life. The students that showed greater independence and participation when using time-assisted devices, so that this has practical implications for the classroom for any student that might struggle with time management. The children in the control group did not increase their time management in any significant way, even though their parents and educators received information that focused on their particular issues. This indicates that education alone is not enough to effectively make change, and that interventions are necessary. As for influence on my own particular practices, I thought it was important to look at a combined approach, as the study did, where education, interventions, and assisted devices were all integrated into improving the situations for students. Personal skill development is something that can be really tricky to wrap your head around and improve, because it's hard to know where to start on items that come naturally and intuitively to most students and individuals. It's hard to imagine how to learn things that you haven't really realized you ever learned, and you just sort of internalized as natural processes. So this gave really practical ways on breaking down what time management can look like in smaller tasks, and practical means and devices. As for practical resources, the article mentioned psychosocial treatments for those who struggle with time management and organizational skills. They focus on organizational skills and strategies. They're performance and motivation based, so goal setting, prompting, monitoring goals and achievements, and skills based. So this includes the use of tools and introducing routines. The article also made mention of particular organizations and programs that both parents and educators and students can all ascribe to. So there's Parents and Teachers Helping Kids Organize. This is performance-based. The sessions are primarily held for parents and teachers. There's organization skills training, which is more focused on student skill development, so students enroll in the course. It's elementary-based. Children learn to record assignments, expiration dates, organize school papers into binders, and use checklists, so basic organization skills. And parents and students are also involved, so parents and teachers are encouraged to prompt, praise, and rewards skill use. There's also homework organization and planning system, HOPS, which is skills-based. It's a similar sort of program to organization skills training, except it's for older students, so middle school students. So there's more of a focus on homework. And then there's, again, assistive technologies. So these are time-assisted devices that are aimed at compensating for deficiencies in time management, orientation time, and experience of the time. This might be reminders, alarm clocks, schedules, and visual and graphic representations of time. So an example of a compensation strategy might be to something as simple as establishing a functional morning and evening routine, or spreading homework over smaller units of time. Examples, which I thought were really interesting, of structuring the physical environment might be to organize all your clothes and all your, back to school items so that they're easy to find, so you can make sure you can get them all together in the morning, or make sure that all your clocks are visible in all the rooms in your home. Another really interesting item were the use of devices that represent time in graphic forms, so dots that slowly disappear or images that shrink. I thought that was really interesting. So those are all the practical resources, and thus concludes my presentation.